Private equity investors are masters at negotiating and at deal structuring. They have total freedom to do anything they want. They can make a deal as complicated as they want, as customized to the circumstances as they need. If you acquire a listed company, you have to follow precise stock market rules on how a tender offer should be made. Or a multinational making an acquisition will have to follow guidelines in order to properly integrate the acquisition, such as having to acquire 100% in order not to leave any minorities and to be able to consolidate the acquisition into its financial accounts. A sovereign wealth fund might require a mature dividend-paying asset. A private equity investor can handle all kinds of different situations. But what are some of the key approaches a PE investor takes? A private equity investor sees an investment as a partnership with other shareholders and management, which needs to be a win-win to be sustainable. A private equity investor is looking to deploy flexibility in deal structuring because it will give him a competitive advantage over other, more constrained investors. A private equity investor is looking to align management's interests with their objective of increasing the value of the company. A private equity investor is able to make use of customized financial instruments, such as preference shares, or use more than one financial instrument in a transaction. The private equity investor is looking to, so to speak, turbocharge the influence of his stake, that is, to have influence over and above his pro rata ownership share of the company. And finally, private equity investors try to take into account, as much as possible, the different future outcomes, both upside and downside, when designing a deal structure. We can think of a private equity deal structure as being made of two components: a menu of both financial and non-financial instruments, a bit like offering an à la carte menu in a restaurant. The first course consists of financial instruments. We have ordinary shares, which can be either a small minority, an influential minority, typically 25 to 49%, or a majority. The last two of these are most suitable to private equity. A small minority doesn't really give the investor the influence he is looking for. We have preference shares, which are much more customizable than ordinary shares and can be specially designed rights attached to them, for example, enhanced voting rights or anti-dilution protection or a fixed coupon payment. We have mezzanine, which is a subordinated loan. This can be used as part of a leveraged deal or as an alternative to equity when the investing ownership does not want to be diluted. We have options, an off-balance sheet contingent instrument, which can be customized to take care of an issue in the deal structure. For example, we could have a call option on some of the other owners' shares in the event of a shortfall in performance to protect our investment. Or we could have a put option on our private equity investment to ensure we can get out of it after a certain period. Let's now turn to the second course of our menu, non-financial instruments. We can obtain a seat on the board of directors. This will give the private equity investor influence over the company's decisions he may not otherwise have. Having a voice on the board is very powerful, even if you are in a minority. We can obtain veto rights on company decisions. This means there will be a list of company decisions that cannot be made without the approval of the private equity investor, even if he is in a minority in the company. Hence the name veto rights. We can enter into drag-along and tag-along arrangement with the other shareholders. Let's say I have 40% and you have 60%. If I get a good offer, a drag-along means I can force you to sell your 60% along with my 40%. A tag-along is the mirror image of that. If you get a good offer for your 60%, you cannot sell without me tagging along with my 40%. So with the drag and tag structure, I am protecting the liquidity of my minority stake. The third course of my menu deals with uncertainty of outcome. For this, I can use a ratchet mechanism That is an arrangement according to which if there is a shortfall, the private equity investor gets compensated proportionately. For example, I have 40%, but if the EBITDA you promised is below plan by over 10%, I get another 4% out of your shares. If it is below plan over 20%, I get another 8% of your shares, and so on. The fourth course of my menu concerns information transparency and access to the company and its records by the private equity investor. This can be done through an agreement on the reporting obligations by the company. The last course of my menu is enforcement. Sometimes things don't go as planned and can even go quite wrong, or unpleasant surprises like a hole in the accounts emerge. We may not be able to rely on the other side to do the right thing, and going to court can be very slow, expensive and distracting. So we can make use of escrow accounts, for example. An escrow account means that cash or shares or just voting rights are put by the two sides under the control of a third party, such as a notary or a lawyer, who can act independently in case of a dispute. Let me give an example, that of the flip-over mechanism. Let's say the private equity investor has 49% and the entrepreneur 51%. As part of the deal structure, the entrepreneur puts 2% from his stake into an escrow account, controlled by an agreement specifying that in the event of something not good happening, the lawyer controlling the escrow account will turn over their shares to the private equity investor. Thus, control flips over to the other side. This example is a way in which we can make sure that in a 50-50 situation, we are not stuck if there is a disagreement or misbehavior. Having reviewed the main instruments available to private equity investors for deal structuring, financial, non-financial, and enforcement that are the most common obstacles to achieving a successful deal. So what are these obstacles? One obstacle is valuation, that the seller has unrealistically high expectations. We could agree to disagree and overcome a difference in opinion by using a ratchet mechanism or preference shares with a guaranteed return, which will enhance the coupon. Another obstacle can be reluctance to give up control by the founders. Private equity investors' expertise lies in sharing control rather than in taking control. This is therefore a very much needed question and is solved by board seats, veto rights and reporting rights. Another obstacle can be a question of image rather than substance, that the other side does not want to be seen to be losing face in some way. This is quite a cultural specific question for which the private equity investor needs to develop sensitivity and awareness. For example, for the founder, it may be important to present the private equity investor as his partner rather than his owner. Another obstacle may be regarding exit, with the other shareholders wishing to remain. This last obstacle may be complicated in the deal structure, with the other side having difficulty understanding all the aspects or thinking that even if the private equity investor has a minority, that the rest of the deal is a Trojan horse to try and steal the company from him down the road. Given the complications of private equity deals, a key skill a private equity fund manager needs is good communication skills to build trust and acceptance of a deal and its complexities. This is even more important in emerging markets where there may be less familiarity with private equity